Okay, I want to spend some time and talk about string muting techniques. This is really important. I notice that a lot of guitar players sometimes get a lot of excess noise when they're playing, open string popping and cracking and dinks from hitting the other strings and whatnot. And I'm going to show you a technique that is going to mute all those things out. What you ultimately want to do is you want to mute out all of the notes that you are not playing. Play the one that you want, the one that's going over in whatever line or chord, but everything else you have to mute out. Everything that you're not playing gets muted. And I do that with a right and left hand combined technique. And this is going to feel very weird at first if you're not used to doing this, but believe me, it's going to pay off in the long run, especially if you play with a lot of distortion and a lot of gain, a lot of high gain. Man, crank your amp up, and if you're playing it's a little noisy in the back, and that's going to get multiplied by 10, and you'll really hear all that extra noise. And you want to cut all that out. You don't want your playing to be sloppy. And sometimes you hear guitars and you hear all that other noise, and it's not very good. So the technique I want to talk about is muting with both your right hand and your left hand. We're going to mute with our right hand. The way I play, my technique is I leave my right hand down on top of the strings when I pick. I'm not holding my hand off the strings. I'm leaving it down. And as I work down the strings, I'm moving this hand slightly. It's real subtle. I'm doing it now just to accentuate the movement, but it's very subtle how I go down to mute out strings as I'm working down the strings. So I'm muting out a lot of the lower strings with my right palm, and I'm just laying it right here. Now obviously if I wanted to play an open E string or whatever, I'm not going to do that because otherwise it'll be muted. You don't want to always mute. You want to hear these open strings, so I'm not muting then. But all other time my right palm is laying on the strings. As I go down a scale, arpeggio, whatever, I'm doing this kind of motion to mute out the strings. I'm going to turn in a minute and I'm going to give you a side view of this. Talking about the left hand, if you're a right hand guitarist now. Talking about the left hand, how I'm muting strings with the left hand is I use my first finger. I'm basically using this part of my first finger right here by laying it on the strings when I'm playing. And basically what I do is I'm muting out all the high strings. See, those strings are all muted out by just laying it, lightly touching this. I'm not pressing down because then you'll be fretting those notes. So I'm just lightly laying the left hand, fret hand on those first few strings, and my right hand is muting the lower strings. So I'm using both hands in conjunction together to mute out the strings. It sounds like a lot, but once you get this down and you turn it into your technique, it's automatic. You don't even think about it. So like for instance, let's play a G major scale. Let's just play this scale here, starting on the G note. Okay. When I play that scale, here's what I'm doing. When I go to the next three notes on the A string, my right palm is lying down on the low E string. So you see that string is muted. I only want you to hear this note. I'm only playing, when I get to this note, this is C. That's the only note I want you to hear. All the other notes I'm muting out. I'm muting out this whole low string, low E with my palm. And if you notice when I play this C note, you can get a real tight shot on my left hand. When I play this C note, my first finger is muting out all these other strings by lightly touching, and all these other strings, they're all muted. So the only thing you hear is what I want you to hear, and that's the C note. Now when I play the next note in the scale, the D note, again, this left hand, first finger stays down. And you see, as I move through the scale, you can see this first finger muting these other strings. This is huge. If you don't do this, you're going to be hearing these other pops and cracks and all these other things, especially if you're bending strings. Like if you bend strings, you're going to be hitting other strings with your fingers. You have to when you're bending up a whole step or a half step or a step in minor third, a step and a half, whatever. So you got to mute out all these notes. And again, I'm muting a lot of those lower notes with my right hand as I go down, and my left hand on the high string. So I'm going to play that whole scale for you. See, now I'm at the top of the scale. I'm at the high E string. But if you notice, you can hear the high E string, but notice you can't hear any other string. They're all muted out by my palm. Now I'm going to turn to my left so you can get a shot of this. And you could see how my palm just does this kind of action as I move down. Very subtle, but you could see how it's going to be muting all these low strings out. And that's how you want to get out all this unwanted string noise. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn the gain up on the amp. I'm going to go to a distorted channel and play a little bit for you, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Now I'm just going to stay in one position so that we can just get the camera to stay. Like I'll just stay in this, whatever, A minor, pentatonic, whatever. And I want you to listen. You won't hear any other string noise, and I'm going to stop in my playing every now and then, and I'll show you how I'm muting this out. So I'm just going to play like... See right here, I'm playing this low A note, but all the other strings are muted with this first finger. No other notes can possibly be sounding out. When I was playing... Now I'm playing the A octave right here. I'm muting down here with the first finger, and up here, see, I'm muting these with my right hand, palm. So as I work down the scale, let's play that G major scale again. Now I'm bending. I'm bending my B note to the C. But notice, every other note string is muted out because I'm hitting, when I make that bend, when you make your bends, you're going to be hitting strings together. And if you don't mute them, you're going to hear them. And it's going to sound, you're going to get all those string noises and pops and whatnot. So when I'm bending on this high string, we're doing a cut here, you're not going to hear those notes from my fingers hitting the other strings because they're all... Everything is muted out. Okay, so I want you to practice this technique of muting with both hands, using the first finger to mute the higher strings and the palm of your hand. And as I was going down that scale, you saw the subtle movement of my right hand. You saw that up and down there on the strings as I go down to mute out all the low strings. This is a very important technique. You're going to have to just practice. It might feel weird at first. You might not lay your hand down on the strings. That might be something totally foreign for you. But this is what you're going to need to do, especially if you're playing with a lot of gain, a lot of distortion. You want to mute all that out. So work with it a little bit. It'll get easier as it goes on. And eventually your playing will be totally clean. You won't hear any noises, pops in between. And that's what you want to shoot for, that level. We'll see you in the next module.